Hello and welcome to the Retro Adventurers. Nick Moffat is my name, and Terra is my nation. I seek the Holy Grail, O Tim. The star's my destination. I am joined today by the evergreen Jason Compton, as well as our founder, Ben Collier. We'll be covering two adventures today, the G.F.S. Sorceress and Lancelot. But first, I understand we received a pleasant message from one of our listeners. So, if you please, Jason, open mailbox.
Jason opens the mailbox and finds a very nice message we got from listener Ben a few days ago. It says, as a longtime fan of interactive fiction since the 1980s, really enjoying your show. Appreciate your mention of the Book of Adventure games, which I never knew about. So he got his own copy on eBay for, I guess, decent prices in 2025. Sent a picture to us with some of his favorite Infocom games. There's Commodore 64 issues of Deadline and Suspended, as well as the gray box packages of A Mind Forever Voyaging and Cutthroats. And he stands in defense of Cutthroats, which he says considered by many to be one of the worst Infocom games, but the characters and the locations felt completely real to me as a high school kid immersed in this adventure, and for whatever reason that game reeled me in like no other. Really appreciated hearing from Ben. Also realized we didn't shout out some time ago listener Darren Folds, who is a friend of mine. We haven't seen each other in person for a while, but he had sent us a nice message a while back. Darren has the currently on hiatus podcast Growing Up 80s and A Comfortable Place on the Couch, which covers Midnight Oil music. So thanks, Darren, for writing in as well.
Wonderful. Fantastic. I believe we also have some, it's really good to hear from people. And also, I think that I have to agree, even if a game wasn't particularly well critically received, I think sometimes it's the memories that really matter, isn't it? That's the stories we ended up taking away from them that really come away with us. That's fantastic. So today we have also a little bit of news to deliver, just little tidbits of information, developments in the interactive fiction world. I think one of the big announcements was that Andrew Zarf Plotkin released a tool called the Visible Zorker. Have either of you played with this recently?
I have not. It's news to me. What does it do?
Well, what it does is, it's a website, and it on one side of the page, it basically plays the original. Well, it plays a 1983 release of Zork 1. So probably, I think that's the latest release they put out. And then on the right, it gives you sort of a debugger view of the source code in ZIL, the Zork Infocom language, which is the sort of Lisp-like language that Infocom used to develop all of their games.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing to play through, even if you're just playing through the first few rounds, because what it does is it shows you, as much as it can, it shows you, first of all, the call stacks, all the sort of the functions that are calling functions that are calling functions that are calling functions. And then it also shows you, as much as it can, the changes to the object tree and text messages. So you'll see, the functions that print out text messages, which tend to be what shows up at the end.
I'm looking at this now. I've brought it up while you're talking about it. It looks beautiful. It's got a lovely kind of modern look to on the left hand side, and the font's beautiful. But then on the right hand side, it's got this really lovely kind of IDE as well. Yeah. It's great. I love it. It's fantastic.
We'll have to see if maybe more platforms can get something like this.
It's a good learning tool.
Yeah, it's a very good learning tool. Yeah. Jason, have you played with it?
I did. I looked at it just a little bit. I am not a modern developer, so the modern conveniences of modern debuggers are also a thing that I need to learn to understand. But yeah, really cool project. And Ben, you had something you wanted to shout out that just from our research about potential topics to cover up.
Well, this isn't really news. This is just something I found a bit interesting. I was clicking around and I found this amazing thing called the Sam Coupe Adventure Club. I don't think this is anything that ever really reached you guys in the States, but when I was about, I guess maybe 12, I had a friend, and his parents had more money than sense, and so they bought him a Sam Coupe. And I think there were about sort of 12 software titles that came out for it, or something silly. It wasn't very particularly successful. The idea was a successor to the ZX Spectrum, but it was kind of cool. It was kind of cool. And it did have this huge, the people who were into it were really into it. They really defended their machine. And one of these things that I've discovered, 1991, so that would have been when I was 13, so a year after that, this Sam Coupe Adventure Club came out. There were, I think, maybe 12, let's have a look, 13, unlucky for some, 13 episodes of it. It was one of the sort of disc magazines. So you put the disc in, and it had the letters and a magazine there, but then also a whole load of free games and things. So I think I'd like to raise for consideration to the Retro Adventurers board some of these free games from the Sam Coupe library. I'd like to have a bit of a chop at those in future.
And they have been added to the secret spreadsheet.
They
have. The last bit of news that we have for the month, just following along on the Retro Adventurers Blue Sky account, which I encourage everybody to follow and engage with, came across a post from Sharpworks, which is an account that focuses on early Sharp manufactured computers. And he has preserved a tape, a text adventure called Crown of Arturo, which I had never heard of. I had barely heard of these machines at all. I'm not even sure how to emulate these games, but he basically went through a lot of effort and used a heat restoration method for magnetic tape to pull this game off. But we're interested in learning more about that. Hope we can bring you more information about the burgeoning text adventure scene for the Sharp MZ700 series and others, because I love finding out about these obscure regional platforms through emulation.
Jason, you know what really struck me about that? I saw the post. Obviously, you linked to it, and it's got the cover of the cassette. And the cover of the cassette has got, instead of any kind of fancy drawing, they've just taken a screenshot of the text adventure, which is maybe a little bit unimaginative. But what really caught my eye was the fact that the font is the same, seems to be the same font as the BBC Micro. So, or very, very close.
Teletext, maybe.
Well, yeah, maybe it's a teletext font. I don't know, Mode 7, something like that. But I'm fascinated to know what the story is there. That's this sort of kind of minutiae I'm interested. But but it is interesting because I've never seen that font on any other computer really. So for it to pop up on the Sharp is interesting.
More news on these 40-year-old machines as they develop.
Absolutely. And if there is anyone out there from a Clarion Makeup Computer Users Club, get in touch with us, because we would love to see a text adventure on that format, on that platform. All right. Well, that's fantastic. I think we're finished with the news. So now let's move on to the appetizer game for this episode, which is the G.F.S. Sorceress. This game was released by Avalon Hill for the Apple II, Atari 8-bit, and TRS-80, as long as they had at least 40K of RAM. Its release date is listed, the copyright is listed as 1982, but I have seen citations that it was released on New Year's Eve the year before, which strikes me as a date that should have a story behind it if it's true. Jason, do you have any background on this?
There's some research out there. I didn't put it together super detailed, but apparently Gary Bedrosian wrote these games and kind of had them kicking around for a while before he found a publisher. And it's easy to overlook just how important Avalon Hill was in the late 70s, early 80s. Like, they were a major personal computer software publisher. By time you get to what the kind of mid 80s, they're done. They've pretty much checked out, with the exception of an occasional war game conversion. But no, I don't have specific dates. It's tough to get those because there's not the kind of retail industry research that survives for products into the 90s and beyond. But it does seem like Gary had cooked these up more or less for his own amusement, and then found commercial opportunities for those two, and then Lords of Karma, which is the third game he put out through Avalon Hill.
The title Avalon Hill, it's the label. I associate it pretty much with strategy games.
And that was a lot of what they published, but they would put out, they put out some action titles, which were generally not very good. These are actually among the better quality, these Gary Bedrosian titles, Empire of the Overmind, Lords of Karma, and this one. These are among the better quality games that they put out that weren't, directly from their strategy board gaming, department.
I believe that Hasbro bought them out when they finally went into the skids in the late 90s, and they ended up re-releasing a number of new issues of their strategy games, because I think those were a little bit easier to reskin and reissue to existing audiences of computer games. I think that's what a lot of people might remember the reissues later on in the early 2000s or late 90s.
That sounds right.
Yeah. All right. So I began this entire episode with a bit of doggerel referencing Bester, because this game does begin with a scenario that reminds me of the book that I read in the States as The Star Is My Destination, but which was published in the UK as Tiger, Tiger, which begins with a similar premise, which is that the primary character is marooned in space, in nothing but a spacesuit, and is sort of, kicked off of a spaceship after a violent mutiny. And the story involves, reintegrating back into society and and the quest to do this. Obviously, Bester's story goes in a completely different direction, but that reference stuck out to me as I was playing this game. G.F.S. Sorceress does come with quite a bit of supporting documentation. There is quite a bit of fiction here that you read before you play the game. Now, I understand this was part of a series set in the same universe. The what was it called? The Restless Stars universe, or the Restless universe?
Well, that's how he set it up anyway. But sadly,
Yeah.
this appears to be the only adventure. And now you mentioned, that there is this protagonist, but he is no nameless protagonist. He is astronaut Joe Justin.
Joe Justice,
this is a protagonist with a name.
Yeah.
But yeah, it promises series. It tries to develop that and leave us hanging on for more. There is some information out there about Gary, and it looks like he never really pursued game development as a full-time avocation, which is unfortunate perhaps for us. But no G.F.S. Sorceress Part 2, sadly.
A pity, because we had the character of Captain Sokolov or something like that was supposed to be the next one.
Yes.
Who played a really disappointingly meager role in the game, I thought.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
I was expecting it to, given the, we've got the cover here, we've got this marvelous spaceship kind of zooming around in a circle, and then we've got the I guess that's a pseudopod or something there, and you've got the main character here, standing, sort of looking very muscly, and then Sokolov, or whatever her name is, kind of firing a blaster, and she doesn't really feature quite so prominently in the game, does she?
Yeah, Selena Sokolov.
Could you tell me if that was a xenon blaster, Ben?
Very possibly a xenon blaster. Absolutely, yes. I'd imagine it probably is.
Sorry, Jason.
No, I was just saying Selena Sakharov is her name, and she is the proprietress of the titular G.F.S. Sorceress. And yeah, the Xenon Blaster reference. So this game is one of the first to come with the sort of framing novella, and I believe it's understood to be the first, which said, you're in game now. Now grab the book of paragraphs, as they became to be known in later games like Wasteland or Dragon Wars. In this case, it was read book 1, book 2. So there was this separate pamphlet which had outside the game additional background that some of them were real, some of them were misleading. This seems to be the very, very first time that was done, and that seems to be. You talked about the 3 platforms. This is a single load game, text only. So to some extent, that was probably fitting everything in. Not taking up memory to do it. That was probably also a little bit of documentation, copy protection, which again, very interesting that we can go this far back and see that happening. But yes, the novella sets up enough framing for how the technology of this world works, and there's hibernation, there's near light speed travel. Yes, many of the journeys in this game take literal years as you go into hibernation.
I think the interesting framing thing about this universe is that it appears to have been a humanity, and again, it's set in the year 2582, which suggests that this was intended to be released in 1982. But it's the universe in which humanity appears to have been sort of brought forward by decoding transmissions from the center of the galaxy or something, that there's some society that has been uplifting humanity or anyone who will listen, but then you also have to follow these laws that come from this greater power of this ancient civilization.
Well, I thought it was more actually that they were setting up, yes, these alien signals were decoded, and that gave humanity the big jump in technology. But we're also given the sense that things are not going great for humanity. Like in Joe's background, it says basically by joining the Space Force, now he gets access to good food rather than eating the bland rations that are available back home.
The terrible rations on Earth.
Yeah. So we're made to understand that things are not great at home. I don't know if it's so much about the handed down laws from the aliens, more that maybe things have not gone in a happy go lucky 24th century Star Trek kind of way, which this actually would have predated Next Generation. But yeah, that was the takeaway that I got. But yes, the application of laws it does just kind of come into play as Joe, as you said, has been marooned in space for seemingly having vaporized his commanding officer, and needs to come up with enough evidence to then return to Earth and get a retrial, which was that was a bit of space lore that was set up. Like, if you can make your way back to Earth after being marooned, you get another trial. So you have to wait until you've got everything in place before you head back to Earth for the final sleep.
But also, it seemed like a bit of the law was kind of missing in the record somehow. Like they didn't have the full set of statutes that they were supposed to follow.
Right.
Yeah.
Because future dystopias, tend to not have Internet Archive and other things. That's one of the things about past futures is that they didn't count on just how easy it was to store documentation in a lot of places. Yes, you have to find these books and make sure that you can translate them. Can we talk a little bit about just kind of the parser and the maneuvering around the world?
So
absolutely.
Before you get into that, just out of interest, which machines were you on? Were you on the?
Good question.
What did you play this on?
I played on Apple II. I played
you
on
were
Apple
II.
Yeah.
Okay.
I played on the Atari 800.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I couldn't find a decent Atari 800 emulator for this M1 Mac here. So I thought, right. Okay. I'll use the Apple. Forgot the Apple, of course, doesn't have the delete key, which was fun. So yeah, I'm on the same one as Jason. So it'd be quite interesting to see if there are any differences. I assume not massive. They look very, very similar.
I will say that the Atari 800 game did the telltale thing of keeping it simple blue on blue text, which is sort of the default for the Atari 800 OS, which tends to suggest that this is a very bare bones coding job where the focus was on the text engine and the game engine, and they didn't really do too much in terms of UI department.
Absolutely, yeah. Same, basically. It's what you would expect from the Apple base. It's just standard. So yeah, I mean, we've discussed this previously, haven't we? But the Apple's not something that those of us on this side of the Atlantic have the greatest amount of experience with. So it was really my first time playing with it. I'm tend to be loyal to our local machines, but it was interesting and enormously frustrating. And there was probably a button somewhere in the emulator to turn on the delete key. I didn't find it. I didn't use it, and so I spent my time cursing repeatedly after misspelling meteorite. So.
Yes.
The good news and bad news there is that as it only detected the first three letters of every word, it may not have mattered.
And it was good at catching a few typos. I occasionally would type the word sliver instead of silver, because one thing we should probably say about this game is that it has a veritable rainbow of objects and rooms for you to go to particularly within the spaceships. Everything is a blue this or a gold that or a magenta this or a silver that or violet.
Incredibly clumsy parser, I thought.
A very clumsy parser. You can kind of see where they might have saved memory by saying, look, we've got a table of adjectives and nouns, and the adjectives are the important thing. And really, you know, if you open something blue, then it has to be this. And if you're going to something blue, it has to be that. But it's I was able to type the word sliver by accident instead of silver, and the game just kept going. It said, "Oh, I know what you mean. You mean the silver book, I think it was."
I guess the counterpoint to that, I don't know if you had the same experience, kind of going through the airlock. So you're going through the airlock, and the airlock has a metallic door, and there is also a meteorite or a meteor. They just call it a meteor that you've got in your pocket for various reasons. And if you do that, you frequently find that you're having to. You can elaborate and you can say, open metallic hatch, but you have to write the entire thing if you've got the meteor in your pocket. If you don't have the meteor in your pocket, you can just write open metallic and go through the door. The same way that the inside of the airlock was kind of open black, go black, and then it could take you through the door. But yeah, if you had things that were sound-alikes in your pocket and you tried to do those sorts of actions, you would get the parser would get terribly confused and start telling you that you couldn't open the meteor and things like that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. I'm gonna defend Gary here and say that the manual, because the manual does say it basically sets you up to expect a 3-word parser approach. It's it's like verb, adjective, noun. So he is telegraphing that you're right that yes, when there were those cases of when there was ambiguity, it would not do the kind of infocom later thing where it would say, I think you mean the blank. It would just pick one if there were two things that were black.
I think it's important to remember when this was. It's very easy when we've played the I mean, we'll come on to this later where we're talking about Lancelot, which has got quite a rich, unusual but rich parser. To imagine that they're in some way compatible, they're not. This is what we've got today on the show is a kind of story of a decade. We're bookending the 80s. We've got this right at the beginning of the 80s and then later. So yeah, I mean, it's of its era, isn't it?
I actually thought the parser, once you understood the 3-letter max, I thought it was actually fairly easy to deal with. There is a robot that you can and indeed must command. So you kind of append robot to the beginning. So robot go door. It'll carry out those commands. The quirky thing I found, you need to be holding the command box for it. I did find that when I tried commanding the robot without it, it seemed like it was giving me feedback that my commands were working, and they weren't actually. So I didn't experiment with that as much as maybe I could have. One thing we didn't mention is that this game is slow. I don't know what you did.
I turned up the speed. That's the one guy.
I also turned up the speed. Yeah, the game is slow, and it uses that slowness sometimes for text effect. So if you're crawling through a tunnel or something, it will say crawling slowly, crawling.
That's right.
And you can hear the fake Discworld as you go. Or
like Crypt. Well, that wasn't Discworld.
It wasn't a disc, but
it was all. This was all memory resident. But you're right, and just like Crypt of Medea, it used those text effects. The Scott Adams adventure system also would have delay effects and things like that. It's interesting that when Infocom was setting up their system, they completely ignored those types of text effects. They did have the one time-dependent entry game, Border Zone, but they did not put in a system for delayed text or the kind of interesting printing that we got in games like this or Crypt of Medea. We'll talk about the Sea Stalker sonar scope hack at some point, which is pretty amazing. But like that the very earliest games were thinking of using how can we paint text in an interesting way, and some companies didn't really see that as an area to explore. We talked around but didn't talk specifically about this is a game that, and not just because part of it is set in space, maybe that was part of the origin of this, but this is not a compass direction game. Everywhere you go is you tell it the portal or the pathway that you're going to follow. Yeah.
And they tended not to be much in the way of branching. Actually, you would typically follow, and then you would follow, and you would follow, and it was unlikely that you would come across many branches, or this isn't the sort of sprawling map game.
The ship had a central corridor, from which the rainbow of rooms branched out.
Yeah, that's right.
So you could go to different functions, navigation or weapons or whatever. But on the planets, it did tend to be you were just progressing further into the plot on the planet.
There were kind of absolutely. There was the occasional one where you could kind of end up in the quicksand or whatever it was, or the swamp, but or the mud. Can't quite remember. I think that felt almost like an afterthought, and what they were doing was using that follow to kind of almost progress the narrative in a linear way.
So regarding the robot and the inability to command it when you did not have the gold control box, I believe it was
silver. Gold was the translator.
Oh, that's right. Gold was translator, silver was the control box.
And there's a silver book.
Yeah, silver book, exactly. Or you could say the sliver book, and it wouldn't know what you were saying. Because there's a point where whenever you're trying to get in and out of the spaceship with the robot, you have to have the robot do part of the cycling of the airlock for you, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, you can't then enter into it. Mm-hmm. And you can accidentally send the robot off while not holding the control box, and then you're stuck in the ship. There's just no way out. You got to start over.
That's interesting. That didn't happen to me.
You could get yourself stuck. Yeah.
I got myself completely stuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to use the robot to get in and out of the ship, but yes, you could. I guess there's a way to. Oh boy, yeah.
If he doesn't close the black door on the way out, I think it was, then you just were in an airlock that you couldn't cycle any way unless you had the control box to.
I want to talk a little bit about the prose structuring. I did notice sometimes he would describe thing as one enters a small airlock, but then would switch to the phrasing, you are doing this, which I thought was a little odd and unnecessary.
So I'll tell you, I think I know what that exposes, because I think a lot of those descriptions, if the robot does it, it'll say the robot does this, that, and the other thing.
Okay.
And I think that the one steps out of the airlock or whatever it is, I think that's just a memory savings by not implementing that logic.
Because then they don't have to
templating.
change the tense of the entire thing, and they can put what? Yes, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It did sound a bit royal, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that's not so royal because we do not have porters with us was the small inventory limit, which I believe is
Oh,
4 items, one of which is the spacesuit that you need for half the game. So when we're talking about needing the translator box, needing the
yeah.
robot command box, these are like real choices that you have to make. There were a couple of spots in the game where I had to slowly backtrack back to the ship, put something
I,
down,
I,
slowly go back to where I
yeah.
was.
And the robot can carry some things for you too.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't have too much trouble with that. That was the beauty of the robot. 'Cause you could just
Yeah.
give it the stuff. That seemed to work pretty well for me. Didn't cause me too much pain, but yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, we did talk about how poor Selena. This is her ship. The early plot is that we're drifting in space, and then we see an ion trail, which we are able to follow
Yeah.
because somebody slipped us a thruster pack as we were being kicked out of the airlock. So we kind of take over her ship, and after just sort of leaving a couple of puzzles for us to fix, she says, "Well, you seem to know what you're doing. I'm going to go hibernate."
Yeah,
Which
I'm off to bed.
my remark was, so the American developer Gary Bedrosian takes her out of the game. Were this level 9, she'd be wandering around, moving items, and randomly getting killed as part of the fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. It's did you find, and this is interesting because I had to restart at one point because I stuffed it up, obviously. And the first time I played, I went in and I had if you remember the was it pseudopod, amoeba, whatever it was, amoeboid, whatever,
Amoeboid. Yeah.
amoeboid, the amoeboid,
Giant
and obviously
amoeboid.
you've read the book and you know how to deal with the amoeboid because you read the book. And you come out, and I went straight in, and I think she was yelling at me or something like that, and then a couple of moves later, said once I solved the problem, said I had to test you, I had to test you. Second time I played it, she didn't say that, and then randomly, about sort of 2 planets later, she suddenly announced to me that that line just suddenly appeared. So that presumably somewhere in the code is some sort of line that says, if you've done this and you've done this and you've done this, then she will announce this. But perhaps it waits a move or something. I don't know, and only then tells you when she's able to.
I found the first time I played it through, I had the same situation where I started over
Yeah,
because I just
yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
got myself
yeah.
probably with the airlock problem. And so I started over and I got to her the second time, and there's that point where she says, "Well, we'll get to know each other better later, and I'm going to bed," basically. That whole scene like didn't happen, and it surprised me. And so I went and looked through a walkthrough to try and figure out what was going on. And the walkthrough told me the reason this didn't come up was because I hadn't looked at her the second time I went through, because obviously I've already played and seen those descriptions, right? And it said the way to get her to say this is to try and kiss her.
She
And then
because
yeah.
I'm basically a 12-year-old, I did that, and she slaps you, I think, and
Yeah.
says fresh,
Yes.
like that.
But then she says the text of like, well, there'll be time for us to form a relationship later or something like that, and then gives you the lecture about how she's going to hibernate until they get back to Earth. So,
Oh, that's weird. But
yeah,
then
it's a very strange logic system.
you would have to do that after some other stuff had happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first thing I tried to do was kiss her. That is a shocking admission.
Well, the game anticipated you, so there we go.
I think it's what you expect to have a response to that kind of thing, don't you?
I mean,
So,
given that her quarters are described as like a saucy boudoir or something throughout the text, right?
That's
'Cause
true.
when you go into the captain's
Yeah.
quarters, that's how it's described.
They certainly were, and
true.
she sachets off to the hibernation chamber. That was an interesting word choice.
We were
But it's-
robbed without getting a second game from her. All right, let's see. So I just came personally from some archive research with a school project. And so I have to say, I do respect this game for accurately representing what archive research is like. I think perhaps it oversold the giant spiders and the security robots. A gold nugget's a bit costly for access to most archives these days, but I think by and large, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, that was a disappointing puzzle late in the game. I felt like they'd done a lot to establish, how the world worked in that little game manual that you get. It describes different planets and gives you a sense for what what you're going to expect there, and some some tips on how you may want to not shoot first and ask questions later and so forth. And then yes, in that kind of penultimate puzzle where you need to obtain these books that you're going to bring back to Earth. The archive access is blocked by a monolith. And like, all right, we're doing the 2001 thing. So what's it going to be? Are we going to touch the monolith? Are we going to go through? No, we just have to buy access from it for the gold nugget. Like that felt
I was so
that felt
ready
very
to have to
uninspired.
prove my intelligence or something, right? Like that was what it
Yeah.
seemed like it was ready for. But yeah.
Not inspired choice towards the end, but that we see that a lot actually in these games where you kind of get to that 70-80% mark and then they're like, well, I've got 1.5K left. I need to put this much more story in. What can I do? We just buy access and move along. It sounds like I enjoyed this game more than the two of you. It had been a long time coming playing it. This is one of those games that almost 40 years ago I first learned about from that book of adventure games. And like, wow, this seems like an amazing space adventure. And it's not quite that, but nor is it bland or unintuitive. I thought overall they did a pretty good job with it.
Well, it had a lot of character. It had loads and loads of loads of character. The robot as the kind of all of the business with asking the robot to move around and all that sort of stuff was clever. It was well described, and I think it's just off its age. It was just the one thing I suppose was made it a little bit obvious was this fact that you get into the control room, you've got the control pad there, and you've got the buttons, so you can see there's obviously this kind of order of things you needed to do. So it had that kind of structure there that maybe made it a little bit obvious, but no, it's great fun, and it was doable. It wasn't tough. It was doable. You understood what needed doing. You could see what you needed to do. So you weren't sat there for donkey's years trying to figure out how to make something work. It was fairly straightforward enough to make it an enjoyable experience to play. I would have thought for beginners.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it was entertaining. I think it was charming. I really loved the paratext. I really loved the novella that came with it, and the fact that I kept uncovering more and more. I thought I'd finished. I thought I'd found all the documentation. I kept finding more. I'm like, okay, this is actually the technical one.
Yeah,
this here is sort of an in-universe game playing guide with a bit more of strategic advice, and then here is just this this novella of fiction, which is fantastic.
The novella that came with this was certainly miles better than the one that came with the pawn. In my opinion, it felt like a properly written story. It felt like you were reading genre sci-fi from that era. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, really.
It reminded me of The Adventures of Smoke Bailey, which came with In Search of the Most Amazing Thing, in terms of just having a full story right there that felt like a prequel to the story you're about to play.
Interestingly, and a complete tangent here. You mentioned the stars my destination.
Stars my destination, yeah.
And we've got
Tiger,
this as Tiger, and we've got this one here where he's out in space. And it occurred to me that, and the first time, and hopefully our viewers will understand what I'm talking about. If you've read any Ian Banks, there's a book by Ian M. Banks, one of the culture books, Accession, and it just as you were saying that, I realised that starts with what is essentially a mutiny, and with in this case a robot being thrown out into space on its own. So so I assume Banks was doing a pastiche there of the Stars My Destination.
It's a nautical trope, right? Like it's a pure sort of pirate story thing, right? There's been a mutiny on board a ship, and someone is left marooned on an island with a pistol with one bullet, and it's that kind of setup. It almost could be a hornblower story, almost.
Absolutely, right.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention before we go is the sandworm, which felt very Return of the Jedi, but as this was written in 1981, I think only Empire Strikes Back had come out.
Correct.
So that really was a Dune reference rather than a Sarlacc reference.
I would say it's clearly Dune. And another one of those places where time passes, because the whole premise is that you are marooned in this recycling spacesuit. So it's meant to be a true life sentence. The suit will keep you alive. So yes, as you are devoured, you are then
it's like 15 years in a digestive system, immobilized, which sounds worse than death to me. But all right,
Joe's tough. He can take it.
He can take it. Joe Justice. All right. And now we'll go on to our next main event, which is Lancelot. which is a level 9 game from 1988. And I think this was a really Nexus year for hardware support. I have here listed that this game was released on, alphabetically, Amstrad CPC, a whole variety of models for that, Apple II, Apple Macintosh, well, Mac Classic, Atari 800, 130 XL and XE, as well as ST and the other ones, BBC Master System, BBC Micro or the Electron, Commodore 64, C128, of course, as well, the MSX, as well as PC for DOS, and the ZX Spectrum models, including the 48K up to the 128s and the certain models of the Timex.
Blimey, I've got different. I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry here, and I've got in it. It was a very different list, but it's big as well. It's got the PCW. It's got the Amstrad PCW, which was obviously the kind of word processory CPM machine that Amstrad put out. But yeah, massive list of different platforms. And yeah, that was the kind of time when most people had the 8 bits, but all the 16 bits were coming out, and you had one if you were rich, right?
Oh, and of course, the thing I left off of this was that it also came out for the Amiga with rather elaborate graphics, which I assume it tried to do something similar on the ST class machine as well. But this was really an odd moment for computers, because if you're supporting both an Atari 800 and an Amiga, that is quite a spread. And yet that, like, as you said earlier, I think that kind of bookends the 80s, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the beauty of the level 9. What do they call it? They had a
system.
A code, that's right.
Yeah.
Beauty of the A code system. They could just plug it out for all of these sorts of things, and then customize it. Have you seen the Amiga graphics for this? I've just seen the BBC ones.
I've seen stills. I haven't seen any. I haven't tried to play it on an emulator or anything.
Fair enough.
I had an Atari 800 open, so I just played the Atari 800 version, which was not wise. I probably should have chosen a faster machine or a higher res machine, which because in particular, I think we can start talking about some of the structure of what it feels like to play this game.
Yeah.
This is another game where this game has a vast map. I resorted to a hint book for its map to navigate any of it. And they tell you within the game pretty early on, just so you know, you don't have to keep typing, go east, go north, go east, go north, go northwest. You can actually just say, go to Camelot and it will take you there. Go to the Round Table and it will take you there. And that was a lifesaver. However, the game starts by asking if you want to skip the sort of founding of the Round Table and the sort of fetch quest of knights that you're supposed to go out and capture, I guess, or convinced to come over to King Arthur's court, and the whole, Guinevere love triangle story. And you can skip that and go straight to the Grail quest with your son. But as you're doing this fetch quest, and as you have more and more knights and damsels and other characters following you around, the text when you go somewhere, and particularly if you say, look, oh gosh, I need to be I needed to be in Gaul, or I needed to be in Scotland, or whatever it is, you just say, all right, fine. Go to the heather bush, and you watch just entire pages of so-and-so comes in from the east, so-and-so comes in from the east, the Red Knight joins you, Gawain joins you, everybody joins you, the demoiselle, whomever joins you, and it takes up half the screen. And then it pauses at the bottom of the screen. So I'm sitting there, going, all right, space bar. All right, now slowly wait for the Atari 800 to render another screen full of text.
Did you get graphics on the 800?
No graphics whatsoever.
No graphics. So I'm interested to know, Jason, what were you playing on?
I played the DOS version. I did check in on.
DOS, okay.
There's a video walkthrough from Apple Adventures that is that's the Mac version. So that's the black and white, heavily dithered stuff. So I peeked in on those. But I went low effort and just played a DOS version in a browser. But that was something, as we just discovered. Not only did they support all these different platforms, but they also supported strict memory resident, no graphics platforms. I guess that's what they did in the Atari. Looks like the MSX version is that, as well as
PCW. You weren't going to get any graphics on that.
I will say I played from a disc. So I mistakenly said earlier in the previous game that I saw the disc run. It was in this game that I would see occasionally, disc drive 1 would
Okay,
activate
so it would be
particular
hitting it
points.
from more time. Okay, interesting,
Yeah.
because there were tape resident, tape load memory resident
Yeah.
versions of it, where, and that's that, as you alluded to, this is a 3-part game, which was something that Level 9 had trained their audience to expect. I actually wanted to step back for a second. My first experience with Level 9 was buying the Silicon Dreams Compendium as it was presented in the US, which was Snowball, Return to Eden, and The Worm in Paradise. Those were games that were created to be single load memory resident on the Commodore 64. So they had kind of crude memory painted graphics off of that. So that was my first encounter with it. And it seems like and those were from 1983. So jump 5 years later, Level 9's doing more elaborate bitmap graphics, but they still want to play on that. Like, well, we'll break the game up into 3 chunks so that smaller platforms can still handle it.
Oh, it's interesting. It was I was thinking that perhaps the fact it was broken up like that was because if you were working on a tape, say you are on a tape, and you'd loaded the game in from tape, then that would make it incredibly difficult to save the game down. You save your position, and I don't know whether you could do that or not on tape, but that putting it in chapters like that then perhaps meant that you could do the first one and then go off and have your dinner, turn the computer off, and or leave it a few or weeks or whatever, come back and then do the second bit, third bit, whatever, and not have to play the whole adventure game through because it was massive.
Yeah, it was enormous.
So thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
So you're on MS-DOS, but which presumably, I mean, this was 88, so this would have just been
EGA graphics.
Oh, it was EGA.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty
Okay.
good.
All right, that's not bad.
So
Okay,
they were really pushing the envelope. I mean, we give Infocom a lot of plaudits for their Z machine, but really, this had features that put them to shame.
Yeah,
in terms of portability.
Well,
absolutely. The graphics for me on the BBC, I was on the BBC, obviously, and the graphics on the BBC really made it. They were fabulous.
I tried a BBC emulator. I really did. I wanted to, but then when that didn't work, I said, "Well, I've already got this Atari 800 emulator open." So
yeah, good old Atari 800. I mean, they weren't spectacular, and they were obviously, I assume they're shared between platforms, and they were using a vector format to save the pictures down and all that sort of stuff, so that they could code them up and then have them reappear without having to redraw them for every computer.
Not having seen them, but having seen the the Amiga graphics, I will say the Amiga graphics are quite clearly bitmap. They targeted their platforms carefully for the artwork.
Yeah, so my suspicion would be that you've got these kind of three different groups. You've got the maybe on the 8-bits and the PC. You've got vector drawn graphics, and they can be used across all those platforms because they're designed in a vector way. And then for the Atari, I guess, and the Amiga, you would expect to get bitmap graphics that are saved down on the disk. Yeah, interesting.
So as I'd alluded to on social media before recording this episode, one lesson I've learned is that maybe I should not schedule 2 games that require novellas for the same episode. How'd y'all like this novella?
It was interesting because it was a very particular version of the Arthurian myth, wasn't it?
Yeah. I was surprised by the modern spellings. I think I was raised on like Tennyson or an earlier version of Le Morte d'Arthur that we read in secondary school or something. So I kept seeing the way they spelled Guinevere, and my brain couldn't stop reading it as Genever, which is the Dutch gin.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it was yeah, I mean, it was an Arthurian. It was a version of the Arthurian myth in extreme brevity. I kind of scan read it. Having already done the sci-fi novella, I looked at it and thought, okay, I'm going to read this and I'm going to look out for things which are obviously meant for me to know. So I need to play the game, but I'm not going to try and absorb myself in it because I know the story. Well, I know a version of the story. It's not the same as this one, but the it wasn't something I felt I really had to kind of absorb myself into to win the game.
Yeah, so Jason, did you have much experience with Arthurian lore?
Yeah, a reasonable amount. Kind of like we've talked about, it's tough to have been an avid consumer of computer gaming in the 70s and 80s and 90s without running into it. I think I have a healthy affection for the film Excalibur, on and on.
Oh, of course. And on the Thracht,
Yeah,
was it
yeah.
the Fast? The Thud?
Enjoyed
Doctel
the Once and
Diente?
Future King.
Yeah.
It's
What?
a satisfying but not obsessive relationship with Arthurian myths. So
My classmates are doing video productions on the Disney film version of Once a Future King. I forget what it was, the Boy in the Stone or something like that. But they will love the fact that you love the Once and Future King, because that's I've been watching them all go through all sorts of research topics where that becomes an actual source they have to cite.
yeah, and this game cites its sources and it cites that, which I thought was interesting that they, for further reading and to see where we were drawing from.
Yeah, I thought that was very good, actually. They what was it? They said something like, "We wouldn't recommend you read any of the books, but perhaps you might like to." What was it? I can't remember what it was. They recommended in the end. They said, "Don't read the books, but do this instead." What was it? I'll have to have a look.
I mean, the Arthurian legend is it's a vast sort of folklore tradition that got distilled into a few highly regarded canonical versions. Le Morte d'Arthur is the sort of medieval one. Tennyson is sort of the romantic 19th century version. But you'll still occasionally find places where all sorts of different versions that have come out of the folklore record have been compiled in different ways. So it's one of those things where, I guess, what other canons could it be like where there are so many different versions and everyone just does their own? I think it's more common in folk tradition than it is in something, much more consumer related in the modern age.
Absolutely. I guess it's probably quite similar to Hinduism. That with some of the legends in Hinduism are a bit like that, where you get this kind of cross-pollination, and they're all aiming at this central truth, but because they've been transmitted verbally for so long, you get local versions, and the same thing. You'll have devas in Hindu mythology who will, for the purposes of the story in a particular area, will have one particular role, and then you go across to the next kind of region, and the different character will do that thing. I think that's true of Galahad, isn't it? With the search for the Grail, in some of the versions it's Galahad. I can't remember. Is it Parzival in some of the others? I can't remember.
So.
But they almost they exchange roles and stuff, don't they? So and that's probably a locality, and depending on
and you find cross pollination with the sort of Nordic myths and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Again,
Isolde and all these other versions that branch off in different ways.
Yeah, who was it that said what was it? These things never happen, but always are.
Yeah,
I can't remember. There's that line about mythology, isn't it?
I found the shade that Ben was referring to, and I'll admit I glossed over this when I was looking at their citing of their sources. But yes, here's what you were talking about, Ben.
Okay.
It says the best of the books consulted were, and it says, The Morte d'Arthur, Sir Gawain the Green Knight, Once a Future King, Plain Man's Guide to Ethics. The most disappointing, Book of Merlin, Mists of Avalon, and the most peculiar, Cauldron and the Grail. And then it goes on and says, we cannot recommend any of the overinflated books on the subject. So there's the shade.
There it is.
I missed the editorializing they did in there.
And what was it they said to do instead? They said, we can't recommend these.
That says, by far the best of the works is Arthurian sites in the West, Radford and Swanton.
Oh, yeah. So they recommend folklore guides, don't they, instead? And kind of almost they recommend guides to local kind of.
Yeah, they're saying basically don't try to read the scholarly histories, just grab Arthurian sites in the West. Yeah.
Cool.
So diving quickly into the game itself now,
Please.
I will say that given that this comes from a folklore tradition where it's been remixed and retold and local versions have power, I assumed it to be far less on rails than it eventually was. In particular, there is the scene where this rather late in the game or in the middle of the game where you are it's at Corbin. And what is it? Is it Elaine? I think her name was. But you are basically the queen of this realm tries to seduce you, or the lady of this story tries to seduce you.
Yeah.
And that happens in most of the versions. It tends to be what they call a bed trick, which is one of those horrible euphemisms for what turns out to be a grisly crime in my book. But she gives him a love potion and appears to be his mistress, Guinevere, to him if you play it in one way.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's entirely possible for you to just go into her bedroom and, just bed her basically and sire your son, Galahad. And so it's on rails. Either way, this character has to appear. Otherwise, part 3 makes no sense. So I thought that particular, because I think one of the most controversial parts of the Arthurian legend is always the analysis of and the moralizing on the love triangle between Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot. And so I thought for sure that would be something where, we would be able to play it however we wanted. But it's clear that certain things are kind of on rails. You have to when you go to the Camelot the first time, you have to fall in love with her. And as a matter of fact, even from the very first choice you make, right, when you're confronting the Black Knight at the very beginning of the game, you fight valiantly. The Black Knight yields, and it asks, do you accept his surrender? And whether or not you say yes or no, it doesn't matter.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So I always said yes. I assumed, because you've read the books, you understand, you've seen the things. You know what happens if you.
I assumed it would be over quickly.
You say, "Oh yeah, I accept the surrender." Of course I do, but I didn't try saying no. So
I said no.
Does it say, "Well, you do it anyway"? What does it say?
Yeah. So what happens is, if you say yes, he says, "You fought valiantly, and you are honest and true, and I would love you to come to my round table and join me in Camelot." Basically.
Yeah.
If you don't, 2 of his guards emerge from the bushes and hold you back, and he sort of gives you a sort of a cutting remark and then disappears.
Okay.
And you have to then go to Camelot sort of your own. You have to find it yourself. And so it doesn't really matter. I mean, both ways.
Right, okay.
I think everybody's going to find their way to his court and realize this is what the story is about. But it was an interesting thing that right up from the start, you could kind of play it differently, but it didn't really have a big effect. It was kind of on rails.
Well, it didn't matter to the outcome of the story, but it did matter to the score. When you make the non-chivalrous choices, you either don't earn points or you lose points. So yeah, I tried the same thing, also assuming that the game would just be a quick game over and we'd restart. But yeah, this game seems to favor, we're going to advance the plot, but it's going to show up in your final score. This is definitely one of those games.
There's some very strange stuff in there. I had a look at some of the scores just, to kind of get hints and so on. And there are things where you have to do things and lose. It seems like you have to do things and lose points. And there doesn't seem to be another way of progressing the game. You lose the points, and then you gain some points back by doing something else. I'm trying to think of an example where, in the 3rd chapter with the lady, where you go into the tent and she tries to feed you loads of cakes. And I think with that, I think once you go in, you automatically lose points, but you then gain them back by doing this, that, and the next thing. It just seemed odd. It seemed odd.
Yeah, you can't eat all the cakes or you'll die. But it does seem like you get a piece no matter what, just because, again, this is on rails and that's what happened in the legend.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking at this. There's they're all 10 and 20. Did you folks get actual updates on your score live during the gameplay? It was all at the end.
Or you hit score. You can ask.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't do that.
There we go.
This is my.
I wasn't that clever.
I think I'd just come off doing the Sorceress game and wasn't expecting such a rich parser. But it was interesting.
Well, can we talk about the parser a little bit? We've talked about some features, and yes. So the travel system, you can go to a place, go to a person. For whether we call this a bug or a feature, you can go there even if you've never been there before. So it's not a map reveal system. I mean, convenient, but you can question it. Many of the platforms supported, and many of the smaller platforms supported a RAM save and RAM restore, which in 2025 we can snapshot our emulators or whatever. But back in the day, that was the difference between a 1 second save and if you're playing on a C64, a 1 minute save. You're grabbing the disc, putting it in, waiting for it to save.
We didn't have discs on C64s in this country. Well, we're all impoverished. We had tape drives.
And undo, like this game supported undo on limited platforms, and that is very rare.
I had undo on the Atari 800, and it was I used it a few times.
Now, on the other hand, commands like examine man, you don't need the word man to finish this game.
Yes,
And
that's
that's
right.
like, well, because there was a
Yeah,
early bit where like a
yeah.
man at arms salutes you, and I'm like, salute man at arms. You don't need the word. Examine man. Nope. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
oh, okay. And again, I know that the pros ultimately had to fit in a single load, 48K spectrum. I get it, but those were points where I'm like, okay, description text, the kind of as the story unfolded, I thought the writing was pretty strong. It was not overly flowery. They were aware that they were trying to fit to the 4, 5, 6 lines of text below the graphics on many of the platforms. I thought that was good, but when really basic stuff like
Yeah.
just examining this map, I'm like, oh, okay. And I
It's
think
a bit
that
frustrating.
it was, and it marred kind of the interactivity, I guess.
Yeah.
Nick's kind of pointed out a few times that a lot of this is just trying to figure out what is the path through the legend that we need to take, answering these yes/no questions as we go, where the real impact is probably just going to be the score rather than
Mm.
whether
Yeah.
or not the
Yeah.
plot advances. So
And
that
just, is it worth covering off some of the stuff around the scoring here? Because obviously this game we didn't talk about this. The game was released. It had a bit of a competition associated with it, didn't it?
which was separate from the score,
So
wasn't
you
it?
had to get the Grail, didn't you? You had to show that was
Yeah.
that the way? Yeah, you had to get the Grail in the game, and if you did so, the first person to do so would actually receive a Grail.
But I believe the way they asked you to prove it was that there were capitalized words throughout the game, and I think the first time you encounter them, it says, "Just
Yeah.
so you know, there's a competition that will end in 1989. So if you're
Yes.
playing this in 1990, don't worry about it."
Yeah.
But I think that was you had to write down all the capital words that you saw and then send them in as proof that you had reached the end. But the one thing I think that I've eventually found the walkthrough and went through it all to complete the game. And the one thing that walkthrough told me was that there were 10 points missing. And the only way you could get those last 10 points is after you got the Grail, you then went to a library and found a book that gave the history of the Grail that went into the future and would tell you what the story would be after you. And that
Oh,
was where you
wow.
got those final 10 points to get to a pure 10,000 or 1,000
Wow.
rather.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did that were any of the capital letters in that bit? So you
I didn't play that bit. I had the Grail. I was
All
done.
right, okay, done with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was on an
Interesting.
Atari 800 mind, so
Yeah.
I didn't. My patience had already been exhausted.
Yeah, fair enough. It's interesting.
that itself, like that's an element of UK gaming culture that we did not have. These actual cash prize competitions. When I first learned about Pie and those other games,
Yeah,
where the kind of the game was almost secondary to this alleged big money or big object prize
yeah.
that you would get by
Yeah,
finishing the game. We really did not have much of that in the US, directly connected with computer games.
It's funny, isn't it? And I wonder why. I know that the press over here, obviously, people get the dailies, and putting a competition like this into your game, especially something like you'll get a Grail, a kind of diamond, wasn't diamond studded, but kind of gem encrusted Grail will be given to you, as the sort of thing would get you into the sun or something like that, and really boost the sales of the game. I guess was it a bit more balkanized over in the States? You've got different papers in every different town. It's I suppose it's more difficult to use a cheap gimmick like that to get the game well known.
I actually think it was a federal law thing, and this
Oh,
is this is brilliantly
gambling.
sent up in the film Real Genius, because there were lots and lots and lots of sweepstakes and contests of other kinds with prizes in the U.S. However, anybody who's seen a commercial for these from the 1980s or 1990s will always hear and see on the screen "no purchase necessary."
Yeah,
So at least at the time, you couldn't do a contest that
yeah.
required, in this case, buying this game. So if there would be and with Frito-Lay chips, they do, there's a $50,000, giveaway available, and there's going to be a prize or game pieces in each bag of chips. However, no purchase necessary. If you write to this address, we will send you one of these game pieces. You don't have to buy the chips. And I think that would preclude any sort of
that's
video game
interesting.
based,
You see, yeah,
solve
you
like
see,
that.
we've got the
This
same
federal
thing.
gambling law.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've got the same thing now in this country, but I'm not sure it was the case back then. And I think they changed that. They liberalized gambling massively when the national lottery came out in this country. must have been what, 1995 or something. And I think at that point maybe that came in. I can't remember, but it's very strange because I could have sworn that's been a thing here for a long time, and I half wonder about the legality of some of these things. Maybe because they considered it a game of skill. I think there's a difference between a game of skill and a game of chance. And I think with a game of chance, I'm probably talking complete nonsense. I think with a game of chance here, you have to allow anyone to do it. With a game of skill, maybe not so much.
No, we're all very qualified on these topics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
well, I was going to say,
know nothing.
I think your supposition about the different media landscape may be relevant. I'm not entirely sure. One thing I can tell you is that what we did have in the U.S. in the late 70s and early 80s was sort of, I remember in particular a book called, I think, Bees Only Sting, which was an art book. It was really intricate, like inspired by Escher and some other things. There's really intricate, full spread pages. Really appealed to me as a grade schooler. And the book itself was said to be a set of clues for a scavenger hunt somewhere in the 48 contiguous states of the United States. There was a golden bee that if you could find it, you could dig it up. You could claim it if you had the answer somehow.
I think I heard about this.
Yeah, and it's not the only one. There were others, and there are books that you will be able to find still in libraries and things where, they will say, here's this competition, and you have to go and look through the newspaper archives to find out, oh, that one was claimed in 1993. Yeah. That one wasn't found until 2011. And occasionally these stories do come up of someone who's actually finally cracked a book that was released in 1978. They finally found the prize.
Fantastic.
But yeah, so it's not entirely unheard of, but in a very different character, I think.
Yeah. So I guess we have to kind of pull ourselves back onto the
game.
Back to the game.
All right, let me talk, because we brought up the parser briefly, and we've been talking about the fact that we had these NPCs, which Level 9 is infamous for its rich interactions of NPCs.
Yeah.
And I will say that I found it amusing that you had to basically program your NPCs because they were all following you around. You were trying to collect the King Arthur's court for yourself. And you had to sort of direct them in almost an assembler language in that you would have to, there would be a task that would require the strength of 2 people to complete. You had to push something or lift something or cut something.
Yeah.
And you needed more than one person to do it at once.
Yeah.
And if you told the other person to do it, then only one of them would do it because that action would take place immediately. And so you would have to say like knight, comma, wait, comma, cut thorns, comma, cut thorns. And then when you typed cut thorns, comma, cut thorns, the both of you would be doing those actions in sequence and you'd be able to finally kill this magical bramble bush.
Interesting. I mean, that gets particularly acute towards the end of the game. And I'm not going to ruin it for the listeners by telling them how to solve that particularly horrendous final puzzle. But I sort of will. In as much as you are literally stacking, like, what is it, 4 people, including yourself, 4 people's different actions on top of each other to make something happen, so that a series of things all happen at the same time.
You're kiting other NPCs and villains and things together into one situation, and it's a wild setup. Really cool.
It must have been an absolute nightmare, and I'm not surprised they felt happy offering up a jewel encrusted grail with problems like that. But really interesting.
Whoever did this first earned that grail.
Yeah.
Whatever it was actually made of in the end.
Absolutely,
electroplated.
100%. It was loads of those absolute rotter puzzles, the wall of fire and so on, and all those sorts of ones where you're doing exactly that same thing. I really like this. I thought that combination of using people in that way with the way that the story was written, I really got into it. And even though there was that weird second person thing going on,
third person.
It was in the
third person for me anyway.
Oh, sorry, no, not a second. I'm talking absolute nonsense again. Yeah, you're right. Third person. It's in the third person. So and so did this. Whereas rather than being in the kind of normal second person of the adventure game, pardon me.
Yeah.
And that really, to begin with, that really ground my gears. Once I got into it, it actually became quite charming.
Yeah. And I think it's especially when you have so many NPCs working at once,
Yeah.
many of whom you're trying to control.
Yeah.
It does actually flow a little nicer to have, Lancelot, Sir Lancelot boldly strode up and did this, and the Red Knight,
Yeah.
entered rapidly from the east, and, Lady so-and-so did this. And it does make more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole business of the moving around and all that sort of thing. I mean, my exposure to level 9 games is limited. And so I guess for you guys, you've done a few of these, and it won't be so much of a big deal. But I can just imagine what it was like for someone who's been kind of raised on a diet of maybe Twin Kingdom Valley and various versions of adventure, and then they come into this, and they come across this sort of thing. It's really great and really immersive.
Ben,
And of course, go
Ben,
on.
had you played Lancelot in the late 80s, early
No,
90s?
not at all.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I can't even remember why I recommended it. It looked kind of cool. It was fascinating, and you've got these characters who, I mean, the one thing that made me laugh was Galahad throwing shade on you. Once you'd gone to all the trouble of kind of equipping him as the sort of the purest knight in the realm, he then spends his time telling you how great he is and how much better than you he is.
See, that's
Which-
Tennyson right there. That's
Oh, is it?
the I have the strength of 20 men because my heart is pure, and you just go,
Yeah.
get out of here, you punk kid.
Insufferable.
Yeah,
Absolutely
really.
insufferable.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Ben, you missed it at that time. Nick, do you
Yeah.
remember encountering this game in the wild in the U.S.? Because I have to admit, when I first booted up the DOS version, which was the U.S. release, and saw that it was published by Datasoft, I said, that's weird. Datasoft did publish some text and graphics adventure games in the later half of the 80s, like Dallas Quest and things like that. But by 1988, they were not doing great. And I was like, do I even remember seeing this? I really can't remember seeing it in the wild. I did go back and look in the magazine archives, and I did find, listings of it being sold, under the Datasoft heading by, places like Software Discounters of America, but it didn't feel like it got major distribution.
No, I'd never encountered it. So did your version have the same challenge, the same competition in it?
No, I don't think I saw that.
Interesting.
I don't think
You
it
would
was
have
in
you
this
would have
version,
encountered
yeah.
it as like pretty early in the game. You would have had a section where you would have seen certain words in capital, like all capital letters, and then it would have said, there's a competition that's ending in 1989.
I think they pulled that from the Datasoft release.
Right.
Now that you're mentioning it, yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the early things. Like it starts out with this, what is your command, my knight, or something like that. And then, at some point it says, we're going to stop doing that and just give you an arrow, right? Yeah. Just give you a normal prompt. Right. It would do similar things with, telling you about being able to go instead of constantly doing compass directions. And then it also did the same thing with I think it was the first time you set foot outside of Arthur's castle. It tells you that there's this competition.
It's interesting to see. If you look at this, by the time Lancelot was in the works, there's one of the very last games that they produced. There's Ingrid's Back, Gnome Ranger 2, and Scapegoat that were kind of brought out at the same time. Everything after that looks like it was either written for Ocean or was a graphical game or was a PC port for something. This was the last one of the kind of last clutch of games, and maybe the whole shtick with the Grail being, the idea that you'd be able to win a Grail was a sort of desperation, an act of desperation, because the adventure was going out of fashion, really.
It's quite possible.
And I just wonder about maybe in the States, maybe one of the reasons you may not have seen it so much in the States was, maybe things were moving more quickly over there and they decided not to bother.
Yeah, and I think some of it was that Datasoft was, although it had been a major publisher by the later half of the 80s, they were definitely struggling. So I think that has something to do with it. I was an active, consumer of text adventure games, well past their, major commercial viability. So I'm just a little surprised that this never really grabbed me. But yeah, I was happy to have the chance to play it. So Ben, thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, when you had recommended it, I thought for sure that it had been a game that you had played.
No.
Yeah, the Rails element of it, I guess the flip side is if you go completely off in a different direction, then do you risk leaving the audience that bought it because they really dig the Arthurian legend behind?
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. Yeah, and in particular, I think certain elements, like I said, the love triangle in Camelot, I think that's something that everybody expects.
I was very pleased that this did not, because I was a little concerned. I'm like, is this going to feel like Snowball? Is this going to be another one of these ridiculous, we're going through rooms with all these different color codes to it. We will play Snowball at some point, and we'll all have our rant about that. But, and I was also concerned. I know they're different organizations, but like we walked away from The Pawn, which was Magnetic Scroll's first game, and I remember reflecting, that they really felt like tired and jaded, and this was just their first game. Knowing that this was late in Level 9's development, I'm like, is this going to be, are we phoning this in, are we doing lots of funny haha and elbowing? And I really didn't get that impression.
No, not at all. It felt like a lot of love has gone into it, actually, and it had that wonderful depth of immersion. That's what really came across for me. The combination of the ability to the way that I don't know, it's a funny way of I don't really know how to put it. The combination of the characters moving around semi-independently, the flowery language, the graphics, which I thought were great, and everything together just combined to create a really immersive experience that I really enjoyed. So I was really glad that I chose it.
Yeah, I have to say, I did enjoy it in the end. It was a long journey, and it really felt like a journey. It felt like I was covering, pretty much the entire North Sea area. But and into Cornwall. So there we go.
Yeah.
But it really felt enormous. And I think if I'd been playing this in 1988 and spending 2 years or 3 years to get to the end, I think I really would have felt like I had made quite a journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely, got your money's worth. Yeah, I thought it was marvelous. Really, really good.
I did like, the frustrations about ways to, silently lose points or lose points or regain points aside. I did like the fact that the game would sometimes only progress through you being on the ropes or you being defeated, and that it would you'd essentially be punished by not making progress if you were like, ooh, the random number generator is not moving in my favor, I better reload so I can win this fight. There were some things that you needed to be on the brink of death and then get bailed out by the hand of God or by somebody else coming along. I thought that was good storytelling.
It's interesting. It required faith. Yeah. And if you think about the knightly virtues, there's something here. I'm not going to get. We don't have time to get into this, but there were, for example, there were places where, for instance, you were fighting a battle, and it kept on encouraging you to run away.
Yeah.
And what you had to do was continue persisting. There was a fight with some knights where you had to get to the point of death almost, and then, like Jason said, the kind of hand of God comes in and resolves it in your favor. But you have to have faith that the thing you're doing is the right one. I don't know whether we can go through the other knightly virtues and figure out whether they'd work those into the plot as well, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Perhaps we can save that for another Sierra game or
Absolutely.
So that sounds like we all enjoyed the game pretty much. Jason?
I did. I did enjoy it. I was thinking about, does this game have replay value? And I think the answer is yes. I think the text is rich enough that I could see somebody going back to it time and time again, like some of the the more lavish Infocom games or things like that. Even if you kind of know what's going on, I think the story is well enough told that it feels like something you could go back to and kind of re-experience.
Fantastic.
I'd take it over Infocom for sure. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, as I've said multiple times. But I thought it was super. And Nick, what was your take?
I don't know if I would say I would take it over Infocom. It's a very different experience, but in terms of creating a vast immersive world, it was definitely an excellent way to do that. It definitely achieved that very, very well.
Yeah, the one note that we hadn't touched on that I'd written down was I thought it was a cute use of Merlin's library to provide in-game clues. Although it was interesting, not out of character or wrong for the game necessarily, but the messages are that Merlin's trying to hurry you along. You're like, well, you're not gonna get any glory hanging around my library, but in fact, you not only for getting game clues, but also getting the points bonus for having read everything. You do need to stick around and read through. You
mentioned pithy jokes, and I did remember that as you sleep on Merlin's bed, you lie on Merlin's bed very early in the game.
Yep.
because you lose points if you sleep at the stables like they tell you to.
Yep.
If you lie down on Merlin's bed, it says something like they're covered in unpaid bills and you have to sweep them aside.
You know, I did see that, and I guess I didn't feel that was immersion breaking. You know, although yes, bills is perhaps a 20th century concept, but yeah.
It was just it was a strange sort of tone, I think, for that early in the game. But
yeah, I guess I gave it a pass because it was Merlin.
Yeah, definitely a strange character, and anything could happen. But also, again, as I said, some of my colleagues have been working on the Disney film in which Merlin is very careful, very deliberately breaking the fourth wall. So perhaps the Once and Future King references finally broke through. Well, it's been a pleasure to be back on this show, getting it back to its roots with some 1982 games, some level 9 fun, and also to have Ben, the return of our glorious host and founder.
Well, I tell you what, Nick, it's been a pleasure having you as a compere, and it's been great fun doing these games. So I'll pop in for some more fun in future episodes. It's been a blast.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Jason, and we'll catch you all in the next one.
See you next time.
See ya. You've been listening to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about classic text adventure games. This episode was produced and edited by Jason Compton. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, including Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Podcast Addict. Visit us at retroadventurers.com and follow us on Facebook and Blue Sky. The Retro Adventurers is based on a format originally devised by Ben Collier, Jason Compton, and Dave Hawkins.